Welcome back to Danny Rant. Today we have a very special guest and I'm very excited to have him here. He's in Melbourne for once. He's not often here. But Mr. Grant Smillie, if you don't know who he is, you've obviously lived under a rock, but he also was a founding member of TV Rock, one of the biggest DJs in the 2000s, and now an owner of multiple hospitality companies in Australia and America. Mr. Grant, how are you?
I'm great.
Awesome. So you're in Melbourne at the moment. Why are you in Melbourne? How long have you been in Melbourne?
I got back to Melbourne, mate, I got in September last year for the first time. Opened a project at Crown called Marmont. So it was an opportunity that just sort of was too good to pass up. So I got back full time from that time. So I've been back and forth to LA, but it's nice to be back home in Melbourne.
How long had it been before that you'd been sort of living back here?
I moved to LA 2013. So, and then I was back and forth to start, but then 15 we opened EPLP. And so it's sort of been, 10 years, long time.
For people that don't know who you are, going from the start, I know it's a long story, but can you give us like a little bit of an overview of like who Grant Smillie is?
Sure. I mean, when I was left school, like everyone, you're going to sit there and do some higher education, or you may or may not, but you sit there and you don't know what you really want to do ultimately. But I was always a hustler, wanting to go out and promote nightclubs, go out, because I was also had the worst idea of all time. And I finished school when you finish it in year 12 as a 17-year-old in May. Everyone else, like, I'm not going out until university year. That's not going to happen. So I started promoting, which meant that I could go out often because you'd sit there, you'd meet all the crew on during the week, and I'd be like, this guy must be of age because clearly that was the thing. And you'd get the promoter cards, do all the thing, pass them out, $1 a unit, make a couple $100 a week because it's a great way to meet people. So doing that was before I was doing DJing and anything else. I was promoting nightclubs, running some of the nightclubs. So it was that kind of crossover moment of being the promoter. It was a bit of a taboo thing back in the day. You were either a promoter running nights, running Redhead, running Seven, and all of a sudden you want to play records and people are like, well, you can't do that. You can't do both. So, but that was my initial segue from, I guess, after university where I did a management marketing double degree. Thursdays were always, Fridays were actually really hard because you'd do Thursday night at a nightclub and Friday was always stats in the morning, which meant I never went to stats. I could have literally been that guy who was, or Van Wilder, and forever and a day back as a 40-year-old guy. If I had stats, I had to pass at some point on a Friday. Never happened, got a faculty pass, and then they said, get out of here, you're an idiot. But I was like, mate, I can employ an accountant. I actually can count, but I started to do this specialist maths. Getting off track. But I then started DJing, and I guess it was like anything, you cut your teeth, some successes, some failures. The first major gig I did was a place called Saratoga. I played before Tim Spry, rest in peace, and George Kay, and I thought I did a great job. Place was full, bought all my friends, that's what you're supposed to do. Next week got sacked, and I was like, geez, this is tough business. And I was like, what's the problem? Like, well, we don't, we like to keep it pretty smooth here, and it was a bit too much of this and that, and it's not necessarily the crowd we're after. And I guess you can sit there and take that one of two ways. You either say that's it, or you start your own night. And I guess that's what I've always done. It's sort of become always like, if you had a record, couldn't get a deal, start a record label, whatever the path of resistance was in your face, it's like there's always a path. And ultimately I just chose to put that path in my own footsteps and my own, I guess, the ability to affect that. So run your own nights, do your own things, start your own labels, run your own restaurants, whatever it is. So it's kind of been how I did it, but not always. That's generally my philosophy.
When you first cut your teeth in the nightclub industry, you were a promoter first, right? Mm-hmm. So from my understanding, this is from Peter Raff's mouth himself, but you were a part of a collective called the Lost Boys, was that right?
Yeah.
So how did the Lost Boys start and what were you running?
So the Lost Boys was a guy called Anthony Gadsden and Brad Krauskopf and myself. So we all sort of knew each other-ish, but Anthony was running the carousel and Brad was working, I think, at the church or something at the time, and Julian Gurner came and approached us. He was a promoter at the Redhead working with Raff, and he said, hey, you guys were all working. I was doing Silvers prior to that. So he said, you're doing Silvers, he's doing Carousel, Brad's doing the church. Why don't you guys all come together and just join this little crew? And we're like, oh yeah, no worries, we'll give it a go. And funnily enough, Anthony went to a different school to I, and so we had this really big network, and then just instantly connected. We're like, this is kind of fun. And the Lost Boys was our like kind of, as everyone has to have some promotional company name back then. And we started Thursdays, lipstick at Redhead. And it was, 2,000 people every Thursday. It's institution, just like unbelievable. And we then went on and did a bunch of stuff together. We kind of then went off and went back to church, took that on. All of a sudden when, the Rolling Stone gathers no moss, everyone all wants to be part of that crew all of a sudden. But you spread yourself too thin, it becomes kind of, you lose that sort of effectiveness, if you will. So we did a bunch of stuff, but we're primarily Redhead was our main baby for a very long time. And at the end of the Redhead, which was in 2000, I think 1999, 2000, somewhere in there, I started working with Brett Robinson at Saratoga, and we started to work off and do some touring bits and pieces, and we threw a party called Respect is Burning at the Royal Exhibition Buildings with Dimitri from Paris and I think Derek Carter, a few others, and that was like our first big foray when we sort of said, we're all part of it, but we started to then fracture. I think everyone sort of got to your points in your life where they had different things to do. Brad was a very intelligent guy. He actually runs Hub, which is that workspace kind of thing, co-working space. He's got that all around Australia. So Brad's gone and done great things. Anthony lives up in the northern beaches, got family. It's just life happens, So we just got to a natural point when it sort of felt like that's been unreal, had some great times, and then just sort of went our own ways. And I started DJing, so it kind of got fractured. It just changed.
So when your first steps, you were in university, you start promoting. Was this while you were in university, or? Mm-hmm. And was that your first step into like the entrepreneurial journey?
It's a good question. I mean, I think so. I think you realize that it became, I guess this is sort of part of all those processes. You go on, you're getting $1 a pass. You've got, first it started with GS on the back of everything, and then it became, this is time consuming. Can I get a drill? Can I make a hole? Can we do 2,000 passes in 1 minute as opposed to whatever? But you sit there, I'm getting paid $200 a week because by the time I get 200 friends to come through the door and guest lists and faxes and all that kind of old stuff you used to do. And then I was like, well, no, why don't we run the night? And I'll pay someone else to do that kind of thing. So that was kind of, yes, the answer is probably. And then you also start to form, what's the marketing gap? What's the need? Is the logo important? Yes. Who's doing that? And you that all sort of went on, and you just continue to grow your consumer base or fan base or whatever it is you're trying to do. I think that's why promoters have always ended up finding they've got an enormous, like my phone's still got thousands and thousands of numbers in it because you just met so many people. You're at the coalface every night. Thanks for coming, appreciate it. So it's great for that thing to sort of, and no better industry, much like when you go to hospitality, going to America, not to go forward to come back, but you have to stand there and you meet thousands of people. You're at the door, hi, welcome, what do you do? I'm Grant from Australia, and the accent helps in America. But the same proposition, you just meet people, and if you've got that ability, that gift of the gab, if you will, generally you can use it in a positive or a negative way.
And it's a great one because you talk about being in a positive way, but there is so many promoters that go on to do such big things, and it's almost like a crash course in business.
For sure.
But why do you think that promoters do so well in entrepreneurial businesses?
Because it's hard. It's hard. You got to learn to say but it doesn't matter if someone says no. You're just asking people to come. At the start, it was like maybe you're the conduit to cool because you could have access or whatever else. But these days, anyone can get access. But I think that it's about, what are you creating that when there's 1,000 other options and what makes your offer the one that's cool? Is it because the venue's great? Is it because the music's great? Or is it because the network of people collectively create this space that you feel comfortable, it feels aspirational, you perhaps spend too much money on an act once in a blue moon, but positions you as, hey, we're going to give back. There's 1,000 reasons why things can be popular or not. And it also defines why it's really hard to be an institution for year and year on after year, because the next generation comes through, habits change. You can go out clubbing hard for years, but at some point, most people either get a job, have something happens in their life, they get married or move into state, whatever it is, and then they lose contact with that circle. Very rarely do you go back 10 years later and walk back into a place and it's the same old faces and going, geez, what have you been doing for the last 10 years? Back it's still at 161. I mean, look, you can do that, but I don't think that, I think it's a moment in time. It's the same reason why some people would say, that golden era of when Onelove or Freakazoid or whatever your favorite club was, you just were going out the most in your life at that point in time. And it's the same reason why the current generation might say it's Revs or whatever. And even though it's currently like Revs around what I own, but right now maybe that's the place that you identified with, is that 20 to 30-year-old period in your life when you went out 4 nights a week.
I say it all the time, people are like, oh, you know, it was better when we did it. And I'm like, no, it wasn't. It was just the best time for you at that time.
Yes.
So I'm like, even now they're like, oh, it's shit now. I'm like, it's not. It's just different, but it's the best for them right now. You know?
1,000.
So it's such an old kind of mentality to think about that.
For sure.
Your music journey is a big part of your story, right? So you are a promoter. You then eventually come into a DJ. You said at the start there was a little bit of friction because you were a promoter DJ.
Mm-hmm.
At what point do you go, okay, well, now I'm going to become really focused on this music stuff?
It's a good question. I mean, I was already doing a lot of big DJ gigs. I think it got to a point again where you create your own opportunities. So that party we did for New Year's Eve at Respect Is Burning, and I closed after Derek Carter at 8 a.m. Now I created that opportunity because I put on the party. So some people would say it's a bit of a Nepo baby vibe, but guess what? I sold the tickets. I did all the stuff. And I knew what I was going to play. I knew the crowd. So there's a bit of a home court advantage, particularly when the international people, there wasn't that huge like distribution of their music. So certain records, that's why Melbourne records worked, or otherwise I knew that at 8 a.m. when I was on, we're going to bring this home with a wet sail. That's what it was. So the music part though, went from then, it got to a point when I was finishing at Redhead, working at Redhead, and the Onelove guys had sort of said, do you want to come together and leave? And I was effectively the head promoter, marketing manager of Seven nightclub at the time. And Draw effectively came and saw me and said, do you want to come to the Prince? Every good DJ should play at the Prince. And I was like, oh yeah. And I said, have you spoken to John? It was John's sort of home court. And I sort of said, well, you know, I'm not going to come across if it's going to cause a big problem. And we sat down, chatted. But it was more money than in one shift than a week's worth of work at Seven. And I was like, and you get to turn up, play to a rockin' room. I was like, we could potentially take this from here to here if we all come together, and without then saying you have to bring your entire team, but knowing that if you come, people generally will follow. But it did cause some heartburn for people, and there's probably one of those 3 or 4 decisions. Everyone thinks you've got thousands of decisions in your life you have to make, but that was one when I'm like, this is going to change the course of my career. If believing one, you've got this kind of, you feel an obligation to the people you've got there and your team members, and me leaving may have a detrimental effect to that ongoing business, but also like, what's my life? This presents a good opportunity. And if you want to stand alone as a DJ and cut the bullshit about, hey, you're doing this and that, it's like, this is how we're going to do it. And so I'll never forget the first night when you go play at the Prince and you're stretching at the back and you're like, righto. And then it's just, but you got to walk out like anything. I think when you walk out into a room, particularly like the Prince, there's no fear. You've got to give it like your mind. We're going to go together. And the more energy you give them, the same commensurate energy you get back from them. It was kind of like, but it was wild, the energy that we got in that room straight away. But that's just a DJ, right? Anyone can DJ. Ivan Gough and I connected, and he sort of said, look, have you ever wanted to make music? And should we do it together? Or at least start with a track. And I was like, sure, no worries, we should do that. And I'd played music for school. I played sax for 10 years. I'd done a bunch of music through that school thing. So music wasn't necessarily foreign to me at all. It was just kind of like, how do we understand from a production perspective? It was the best fast track ever, because you sit there and we've got Logic and you're having to stuff around, but getting someone of the caliber of Ivan who'd done such an amazing kind of amount of work already. I mean, I just come in and I was like, what's the plan? What do we want to do? And we made this kind of cool little underground record first, and we're sort of, trying to find your feet, did a couple of remixes, did a remix for this track Been Good that was very well received. And it was, at the time, it was Ivan Gough and Grant Smillie, and we were sort of trying to understand how much time we're going to spend together. And like, I think with all these things, you just got to see how it goes. We did a couple other remixes, and then what I guess cemented TV Rock was the Flaunt It record. And I'd been out, I'd seen Dirty Laundry play, this band. It was with Shawnee was part of that, with Dean Cherney and Jeremy Jolson. And I saw this vocal, and we just were chatting, and he said, I've got this idea for this vocal. And I was like, cool, no worries. And Ivan and I were just playing more and more in this electro-y kind of realm at that time. I sort of, that Buzz Junkie kind of record as we were starting to roll through, and it was kind of, this is the Sawtooth stuff playing around. So, but we just put down this vocal, and but it was kind of more of a chicken lipsy kind of delayed bass at the time. What we did, it was nothing like the final record, but got in and just had this jam. And we got it to a point I was like, well, the best part about DJing was like you go and play it, finish it, go to the prints, put it on. It's a bit flat, needs a bit more energy here, needs a bit more of that. And I guess that was the best part for Ivan and I. Like, yes, we played a lot together, but we also played separately. So what he would play it to and who he'd play it to would perform differently than what I would. But I was just trying to figure out how do we get this main room maximum efficiency out of this thing. But it wasn't an immediate hit by any stretch of the imaginations. Like the others was set first time I played, I'm like, far out, this thing's going to be big. But that record, it was a burner, and we played it, and then I sent it off to a couple of labels and sort of said, what do you think? And it was a no. And then it was either maybe the Grant Smillie thing, we'll sign it, but we'll just lip service only. It's not going to do what it needs to do. And I was looking for, we're going to do is there a clip? Is there this? Is there that? And there was none of that. So then I was like, well, Ivan, should we just start our own record label and we'll just put it ourselves? So we started Bimbo Rock, which was our first thing. I was like, we can't have TV Rock Records, it's a bit weird, but we did Bimbo Rock. And I got Harris Robotis, who was doing a bunch of art with Frank, and the guys said, can you do this logo? And then talked to Frank Catella, who was doing all the artwork for Onelove. I said, can you just come up with a little logo and artwork for us? And so we did that. And then I just did a mailer out to every DJ that I knew back on the CDs. You'd send it out and we'd sit there, and we're starting to get some good feedback. And then I was like, we better promo it properly. And I was starting doing some Nova stuff, but not really. It was but it was starting to get a bit of momentum. But then it was like, it wouldn't work anymore. And I was ramming it down people's throats, going around the country and just playing it and then ringing Nova saying, you're going to put it on, and let's get these callers and get my mates and you call in. Everyone's going to call in when they do that, spin it or bin it kind of thing. And it was like, everyone's ringing. But it also sounded so different on radio at the time. It was always going to be, and it's the only way I would ever write a record, win it all or lose it all. It doesn't matter. Anything in the middle is pretty boring in my view, because it sounds different for radio. It hadn't happened yet. It was before Preset, Sneaky, which were the next two ARIA winners after us, and it kind of championed in this new generation of electronica on radio. We kind of were the Trojan horse, much like David Guetta was doing for the America, but for that record for Australia at that time. It's the same reason why it wasn't big anywhere else in our kind of ecosystem in Australia. I just felt like we had this moment of influence. It was different, and my crew, DJs, supported it. But then you don't keep playing records if they don't work. So at some point, radio was playing it enough, clubs were playing it enough, or the clubs actually were playing it a lot, which meant the radio had to follow. And then it got to a tipping point, and then it's just spent the longest in top 10 history in Australian music for a long period of time, which is just wild. I remember I was in Albury or somewhere, and Ivan was somewhere else, and he rang me and he goes, it's fucking number one. And I was like, shut up, I'm going to party with.
What's crazy to me is that story, because I didn't know that. I remember when you were dropping it at Onelove as a punter, and that song, we'd wait all night. Like we'd wait till late 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning to hear, and we'd always be guessing if it was coming on, because it wasn't out yet. You couldn't listen to it on radio. It wasn't on LimeWire, or you couldn't buy it as a single. And this is a random thing which I don't even think you'll remember, but I actually went to the TV Rock film clip that you guys did at the ESPY, and it never became a film clip. So what was the story there?
Well, we tried to film clip. We tried to film it, and the guy who had corrupted the bloody video. It was all shit. So we
I've always wondered, because I remember going there with like a big crew, like 12 of us.
Yep.
And I was like, you're going to be in the TV Rock Flaunt It film clip.
Yes.
And we were there with our best like pony shoes on and like headbands on.
Yep.
And it just never came out. So I always wondered what the answer to that question was.
Yeah, because also then we had to do this $2,000 clip, which if you've seen the video clip was Frank Catella said, can we lend some of those lights from Onelove? He's like, yeah, no worries. And got a couple of the girls that we knew from the club and just sort of put together, an Ant Celestino who worked with FCD. We said, look, can we just art direct something? It's a bastard version. We got $2,000. What are we going to do? And that was the clip, because the other one didn't quite work out. So we did the Gershwin room, which yes, you would have come to, but that was the whole intention, fill a place, make it look great. Sadly, that didn't eventuate.
So going back one step, even before Flaunt It and TV Rock, right?
Yeah.
You're playing at Onelove, Grant Smillie and John Course in that room, iconic. There's so many people that would celebrate that, or some of the best memories of their youth. What was the connection with like you working with Onelove? Like, did that change the trajectory like you expected it to do? And
sure.
if it did, like what kind of opportunities did it open up from when you did move from Seven?
For sure. I mean, look, Onelove was growing. I think it also meant for them, they had another headliner that you could then go open to Sydney, or you could go to Adelaide. And so what you didn't want to do was abandon home base. And Kaz was like a really big part of it too. And there was a bunch of people that were for Derek Kay. There was a bunch of people, you know, even there's so many of them. Then we got the Sydney crew, we got Ajax and the Bang Gang guys to come through, and then there was Goodwill, and you know, there was Carl Kennedy was around. So we just had this kind of rat pack of dudes. And I remember the big photo shoot they did where they had like everyone in this one liner, and Frank was taking out crazy ads that just clubs would never do, positioning it as this premium brand. So it meant, one, you could do CDs. So, you know, you're putting a record out or CD out, you do a CD tour. We're going to, you know, Shitsville, all around Australia, but we'd do 30, 40, 50 shows around Australia promoting the Onelove brand, but also vicariously, I got in front of all those people. So that opportunity came, and then John and I were doing more and more together, and we were doing like, you know, sometimes we like, do you want to do 4 decks, 6 decks at the Prince, and doing like, you just figure out, I know what he's doing, and those breaking records, what you talked about, sort of waiting all night to hear stuff because it wasn't on radio all the time. So you'd figure out, Kaz would play a track, I'm like, what's that track? And Kaz had just done Body Rockers, and you're like, holy crap, that's a massive record. So we were getting records like Flaunt It, that, and you know, John's Vicious label were putting out bombs, and we were like, if you wanted to hear where the next wave of music was coming from, we're either making it or we're like signing it or whatever it was. So that crew were just like, I don't know, we were just informing what was happening. I mean, there was others as well, of course, but out of Melbourne, that seemed to be the thing that was happening. And so then we'd be like, I'll take that record, let's do this. I'm going to Sydney, where are you going to be? And it was kind of like this crew that was just rolling around. At the same time, I said to John, why don't we go and pitch Nova and let's do a show together, and like there's a gap on a Saturday night. Let's just see what happens. And if you think Nova comes knocking on your door and gives you this slot and says, oh guys, this is a good idea, we've been at the Prince. Fuck no. We went down there and we just pitched them. We did a couple of demos, did it for free. And then you just, you know, see what happens. And we became like this, and then it became that. And then it got, you know, bigger and bigger. But again, that just amplified the same messaging that we were doing wherever we were in Australia. And it was, Ministry had their CDs, which were, you know, enormous. I did one sort of CD with them, which we did twice. I did with Tim McGee, but there was Onelove. There was that whole rivalry thing. That's the world around. So if you sign with Onelove and doing this, the Ministry didn't really want you to do that. But who cares, mate? It was just like, we're having a good time. I don't get caught up in politics too much. Because
it's that moment in time of that Onelove expansion that, you know, Ministry of Sound 2, like it blew up all across Australia. And then you talk about TV Rock, Kaz James, Dirty South guys you've worked with. Again, we'll go into all that too. But that it was like the commercialization of like dance music or electronic music in Australia. Prior to that, it had been like in undergrounds or warehouses or whatnot. But it's a little room. Prince is a place that holds 1,000 people. So it's always blown my mind how that became the epicenter for this giant scene and movement that blew up to Nova. So to hear that you were chasing it and stuff like that is actually, to me, is like new news. Like I thought the opportunities would have came to you. So you guys were out there progressively chasing these opportunities yourselves.
For sure. I was like, let's go pitch them. Let's go. Who works there? What's up? We're going to find them. And so that's what we did. I mean, you just got to hunt like these things, like in retrospect, you go, and why was it Nova? I was like, oh, I don't know. It's probably better than this. It was just the right opportunity at the right time. And I was like, why don't we go and do MTV or, you know, Channel V or these kind of things. So we started pitching those guys. And again, they're all just, look, everyone just wants content. You pay for it. You're doing less work, but you're getting fresh eyes, and if it's performing. But you're right. I mean, there was this moment in time where that little club, yes, was punching above its weight. But also you talked about Dirty South and, you know, Drag. And I remember when he gave me It's Too Late, and I was playing before Pete Tong at Room. And so I was, and he gave me the CD and he said, do you reckon you want to play it before Pete? And he'd been playing around town. Everyone was like just frothing over this record. And I played it the last song before Pete Tong. And Tongy looked at me and he's like, what is that? Because the room went bananas, right? And so I said, it's that guy over there. His name's Dragon. here's a CD. And he went back and and he came back, I'll never forget, because we all listened to, Radio 1 Essential Selection Friday night we'd tune in Saturday, whatever. And then, this is the hottest record in the world. I played in Melbourne last week. I've never seen a record reaction like it in my entire life. It's Dirty South. It's too late. Check this out. And he played it for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. But again, that's like, that track would have got there, no worries. But just those kind of little moments. But then Pete was like, what else? He became fast friends with Dragon and Kaz and myself. And we were like, have you heard this? Have you heard this? Have you heard this? And you'd just be sending it. I mean, that was, the days when you couldn't hear those things. The only way to do it, who's currently running Pete's, because Pete doesn't have time to listen to 2,000 demos. But you find the guy who's listening for Pete, let's get it to him, make sure he listens to it properly. Is it going to be on? And sometimes those things back then changed the trajectory of a song too. But getting out of Australia and into that international kind of realm is a really challenging feat. I mean, I think it's maybe easier these days from a track to it gets international exposure straight away. But there's also a waterfall of records when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of records a day. There's not 5 sets of ears on it. There's not like a peer group all banding behind one thing. Sometimes it's one video from one thing that ignites one person. It's hard. Music capers a hard business. You just got to keep on throwing darts at the dartboard, and one day you're going to hit a bullseye.
Yeah, that's great advice. So you talk about TV Rock, right? So TV Rock, you kind of brushed over it, but realistically, it was a big part of that whole generation and movement. Why TV Rock? Where did the name come from?
I don't know. I was sitting there. Ivan and I we had a bunch of names, and I was like, I don't know. TV's the drug of a nation, and rock and roll's like this. Dance music's the new rock and roll. TV Rock. I was like, I could see the logo, and I'm like, I think this logo kind of works. Fuck it, TV Rock. And that sort of, you just got to pick one, and it doesn't really matter after that. But we had it sort of initially. Then the initial logo was actually more of the old, when you had a TV with, like, when it was like pre-transmission, it was kind of like that holding pattern that was like on a SBS or whatever it was back in the day when ABC wasn't on the air overnight. That was TV Rock. That was its logo. But it doesn't matter, because it's sort of ultimately sort of, if it's called Haircut, if it doesn't work, no one remembers it. But if it's successful, the name becomes iconic. So superfluous as well. But for us and Ivan and I, like we managed to have a great run rate. Like we did a remix of The Fruit that Tongi loved, no matter what. Was another one. It was essential. That was our first biggest track on the planet for Pete. And then we did, the others was Strange. Like a friend of mine came to me and said, can you work on this track? And I was like, what is it? It had already been played on Triple J. And the Dukes of Windsor guys, it was sort of, they said, oh, would you be open to taking the stems and seeing what's what? And I listened to the vocal with Jack's vocal. I was like, holy crap, why wasn't this a hit? This should be a hit. And I took it to Ivan, and his eyes lit up too, and we're like, just need some big energy and rewrite this bass line. And we took it at first, and I'm like, phew. So that thing was, then we were off. That record really worked. Zoe Badwi, I saw her playing with Mark John, and she had this idea for a vocal. She sang me this top line, which was Release Me. And she sort of said, no one really likes it. And we went, Ivan and I, and I was dung, 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 dung. I was like, that's done. How good? And she was like, well, we said it's not necessarily TV Rock sounds, but we wanted to leverage what we're doing to assist with Zoe and get her straight off the ground. Like, it's not like we were not excited about the track. We were just making a bit tougher stuff at the time. But we're like, when was it a TV Rock featuring, or what if Zoe featuring us? Who cares about the semantics? The record's good. And we just pushed it, but it was, kind of nice little housey moment. Started doing remixes for Laid Back Luke and Axwell and, all those kind of guys. And all of a sudden then people were starting to, Tiesto, can you remix this song? When you start going, geez, this is pretty cool. And then we were getting, $3,000 or $5,000 for a remix. I'm like, Ivan, I think you can make week one. You haven't got checks yet from Flaunt It. Like, no one's retiring on it. Everyone thinks, oh, you had a #1 record. I'm like, buy houses and Ferraris. Phew. That's not going to happen, right? You're getting cents in the dollar. You're getting shows. You're getting a lot of shows, which is great. So you sit there, but some people burn all that cash and are stupid by that. We were very kind of frugal. We were just like, finish the job, go back to the studio, make sure we keep doing it. We tried to do an album. We did do an album. I think we sucked at it, to be honest. It's one of those things that we signed a record label deal, and at that time I was like, I can't run our label and be worrying about ISRC codes. For those who don't know what an ISRC code is, an international recording source code, which means I've got to make a barcode and I've got to figure out how many projections of units I'm going to sell. I'm like, I can do that, but then I can't do music. So I'm either running behind the back end. So we did a deal and we're like, you guys handle all that stuff, then we can focus on creative and other bits. But we did do an album deal. We worked with a bunch of people, and it wasn't that I think I don't know, you're trying to make a sound like some other sound, and it was like you're just chasing stuff it's not there. I think you're really looking for stuff that kind of should just come naturally. And I think you get your whole life to do your first single, and then you get on the road and you've got to compact all this kind of stuff. And I think the record labels, we listen too much of them at saying it's got to be what's the follow-up, and the follow-up could have been anything. You just don't generally know. But that's okay, because you go through that process and then you get to the end of it and say, well, maybe that's just not for us. Let's go back to remixing records and make some underground stuff again, because when you've been so saturated in the public, often the propensity then is for people to go, turn off factor becomes enormous. Oh, these guys, I'm over it. So you've got to then give back to the underground and then see in time what comes back up and see how that performs. And then at the same time, you got to balance that relationship between, bandmates, teammates, all that stuff. And that's often why people don't succeed long term, because they've got divergent things. There's a front man, and I guess in our group, I was somewhat of the front man Shawnee was obviously singing. When you're singing, you're doing that between Ivan and myself. I guess I was more in the spotlight than he was. Not that he didn't, he certainly he was 50-50 with me at the front. But he chose not to do as much of the kind of PR-y bits and pieces. He's more comfortable wanting to spend time, family, studio. But that worked well for us, because it kind of meant that he could focus on, making sure we're set up for success in the back end. I'd be like, right, here's what this promo is going to look like. Here's how I'm going to roll this out. This is what the strategy is going to be. Do we need to get some international collab? I'm like, cool, I'll get that. I'll chase all that stuff down. I'll get the stems, make sure we're getting the pipeline of work together. And then sort of that was the way it worked for us, and it just worked.
Some of those gigs you played, right? Like as Grant Smillie and also TV Rock, is there one from Grant Smillie that is your favorite gig or biggest gig you played? Or second to that, TV Rock, is there one that sort of sticks in your mind?
There's, you know what, every time you think you got a great one. I mean, the hardest, is there a single one? I'm not sure. But I mean, look, Ivan and I, when we played our first Pasha Ibiza gig, and you're sitting there, we played before Pete. We were part of Pete's residency off the back of a few remixes we'd done for him, and we stood there, I think when we played, and I was like, holy crap. Like, people talk about, the Devil's Island and the ability to go and play at the most iconic club in that booth with, kind of, I think before us was Eats Everything, and there was us and then Pete or something, and I was like, holy crap, this is pretty amazing. This is what you work for. And even when in Mykonos back in the day, when we were headlining with, I remember I saw the other day there was a flyer that came up and you got Chainsmokers, TV Rock, and you're like, times change. It is what it is. That's the cyclical nature of it. But we had a bunch of great times doing that. Me personally, look, sometimes it could be as cool as one of the sweaty little boxes that you got away with murder. Like, you got away with the coolest records on the planet, and you just, at that moment in time, was just so locked in, and they were great. But playing, enormous crowds to, the Music Bowl, it's always a good time. Some of the early ones too, when we're on the backside of the bowl, in the first year when house music was just breaking through, and it was just, front can have the front, just the energy at the back. And I think that was the year that Cassius played with us and a few others. And I don't know, there's just, every time I think there's a best one, there's always another one. And I think there's probably one or two more to go, but I don't play for money anymore. I play for fun. So that's kind of the golden rule.
So you talk about this building, there's this building block of your career, right, where you jump. You go from promoter to Grant Smillie to TV Rock, and you continue on. When that was happening, was that something that was like blowing your mind, or did it just sort of naturally progress? Naturally progress,
but I think, I don't know, I treat every part of my career somewhat like a business plan. You've got to have a plan. Like, I wasn't sitting there, I'm not going to be so naive as to say I didn't think, how do I want to get from here and how do I get to there? Part of that, obviously in the back of your mind, you go, if I do this move to Onelove, what does that do? And I'd be sitting there going, well, is there a CD? What does that look like? What's that tour? What's the PR associated to that? If we go to Nova, what's that going to do? What's that catchment going to look like? So all those things, I think anyone in any part of your career, you got to have a plan, whether that performs to its optimal level or not. But a lot of it's also being the hardest worker in the room. Like I would sit there and I work my ring off. And so if it was music, I'd be finding it. If it would be like trying to get a gig, I'd be hustling harder. But also then leveraging other people that are better than you or working with people that are better than you is one of the best ways to do it. So if I wanted to go and start from scratch and be the best music producer on the planet, it takes time. It's like anything. You have to spend an inordinate amount of hours. Or I'd sit there and go, cool, I'm working with Ivan, who's an expert in that field. He's been doing it forever. Very quickly, you start to learn, okay, we can edit this, do this. I can, but am I going to shave the kick drum like that Ivan can do? No way. And I never wanted to be that part of that duo. But I think if you sit there and go, this goes here, let's organize this, and then what do we need? We need a top line. I'll get 5 guys who can do top lines. Let's get them here. What do we need? It was like, what, a fixer. What's the problem? How do we solve it? Let's get it. Oh, we can't get a record label. We'll start our own. What's the next thing? Who's the best artist? Let's get that guy. Cool. And then you're sitting there saying, is it a clip? Is it a this? What's our marketing? How are we going to get this out? I remember when we signed Riverside to Neon, and I said to Smiles, I was like, mate, this is going to be another one. It's either hit or nothing. And I rang Ajax, and I was like, Jaxie, I got a record for you for Field Day in Sydney. And he's like, oh yeah, cool, no worries. I sent it to him. He rang me the day after. He goes, get fucked. He said that blew up the entire festival. And then he was just an arbiter of cool. You know, if Jaxie played it and then he was like, and he started smashing. There was this scarcity of demand thing that possibly part of the thing we're talking about. We would, by design with Neon or even with TV Rock, it'd be like the top 20 guys in Australia, you've got a month. This is yours for a month. No one else. No one's getting it. And same with Jax, I go, you've got 6 weeks, my friend. This is your record. I'm going to back it off. I'll play it in Melbourne occasionally, but this is your record. And he broke it by scarcity and the fact that it was already going to be a hit. I could tell it was going to be by holding the reins on its popularity. That also, similarly, when you talk about going to, why'd you go to Prince? Why'd you wait? Why'd I make you wait? Because I want you to come next week. And it's sort of like you just wanted to give them enough. And that's why these days the demand pull for clubs or whatever else, or even any nature of things, it's out, it's everywhere. You can listen to it ad nauseum. Now, I guess you could have had a CD and play it at home over and over and over until you got sick of the track. But those were the days when you'd say, you have to come, you have to see it. There's no phones, you can't record it. So if you want to have that euphoria and with your mates and go, this track's on, you have to come. And then it was kind of like, but who has it? John's got it. Kaz has got it. Will's got it in Sydney. So you better go to that club if you want to hear that song. And Jaxie's got it. So that was, you could hold a little more of or capture the attention or design it. But it has to be the right record. If it's a mediocre record and you want to try and play games with it, it's just going to go. Sometimes you got to give everyone the same opportunity. But otherwise they're like, stuff that guy. The guy from Neon, he's a dickhead. He doesn't give me records. So it's kind of really the early adopter guys, which is, I think that's no different to any way that you would launch it. That was just the way we did it then. Would I do it the same now? Probably not, because it's kind of a different era. Or maybe it's time to go back to scarcity again. You see Cassian and Dom and all the boys sit there and play their own records for as long as they can, even though everyone's ripping them and doing whatever else. But they still have that same kind of system, because you got to get awareness so that when it goes to Beatport, you don't just put it out and there's a new Dom single. He's been playing it. Everyone's now track IDing it, trying to find it. It's all that same kind of discovery piece. I know I found it first. Cool. It's the same shit, just in a different kind of era.
Medium, yeah. That's like super interesting, because like you're right, like back then you would follow DJs to hear a song. So like if I saw you on a 7 flyer and a Prince flyer, I'd go to both because I wanted to hear TV Rock Flaunt It, you know, like so people would chase you around knowing that you'd play that song or that DJ owned that tune.
Yep.
And it was such a thing. It was like, but it was discovery, because you go discover new venues, you discover new people, you discover new network. It was like, it wasn't just about the song or the DJ that had it, it was about the whole experience. But you are right, because I would say that if I was reflecting on it prior to you mentioning the Dom thing, it's like, I would say that's a dead art, but it's not. because they do it over and over again. Like sometimes it's like that Sunny Day song that he recently put out, I think it's called Day Dreamers or whatever it is. But he's been putting that in sets and putting up clips of that for fucking 6 months before it came out, and they do it over and over again. So maybe they were taught in Melbourne.
Maybe. I mean, James knows what he's doing too. So I don't know. I think it's whatever works for whatever person it is. But the scarcity of demand is certainly a thing. And people then wanting to feel like you're part of it, and you knew like why did you go? Because you were part of that experience, you were part of that journey. You became a champion of that record, whether you knew it or not, because your friends, you tell them, "I'm going to hear this song," and then you became that's the same kind of viral nature at a most grassroots level that these days can amplify so much easier by the platforms we're doing right now, which then live forever. But at that time, and even today though, you're still trying to create, how do you get buy-in from other people to make them feel like they can then be, a vocal supporter and promoter of your own works. But at the same time, you've got to be in the game. You've got to pick up a bat. If you don't pick up a bat, you're never in the game. So similarly for what I was doing with music, it's sort of, if you're either an authority, and that means you're making it and producing it, and label or whatever it is you want to do, but you're part of that community that is then, shaping or, signing some other person's work. It's like, it's commitment. It's you got to do the best of your abilities. You shouldn't sign something just on a folly. It's got to be like, it's your career. You're signing that. That means it should mean a lot. So all these kind of things, it's got to be with some sort of intention, and the intention's probably, the part of the biggest part of the process, I think, personally.
So Bimbo Rock, you said, was originally the label, but it eventually became Neon. When did that change?
It's a good question. So we started doing some parties, because the same sort of thing. I was like, I can do a party, I can do this, I can sub-brand them all out, and we can effectively take the gate and, all the usual bullshit I do. And then I met a guy called Patrick Cleary, Smilie. So it's weird, there's Grant Smillie and Smilie, so there's the two Smilies. But he was our manager, and we sort of said, look, we had a great synergy together, and it was kind of like he knew how to sign it, do the deals, talk the talk, walk the walk. So I was just out there, let's just sign the stuff, let's make some stuff. We also then knew that if we signed it, we could probably remix it or do a production piece on it, which Ivan is still doing to this day. He's one of the best producers of all time, from Australia. So we just knew that we could sign it, perhaps, mix it or do otherwise, promote it, and then sell it internationally, because Smiles was doing international deals. He managed Rogue Traders, did a bunch of stuff. So he had the ability to do the commercialization and all the back end stuff that I just didn't want to do. But it was great to work with someone who had a lot of knowledge. And I think that's what you always want to do, is surround yourself with, again, great people, smarter people than you in a space. And then you sit down, I just be a bit more of an amoeba and sort of say, well, teach me why, how. But not necessarily with the intention of wanting to do that, but to understand it, because I think then you can make a more intelligent decision making about that. So Neon was born out of that. Is there a funny, interesting game about that? Probably not. I just like the name, I think, and we just got, again, Harris, I think, did the logo on that one, and I was like, here's what it is. It just became, Bimbo Rock was a bit too, I don't know, risque, weird, like kind of, if you were trying to be a commercial kind of label, I just didn't know if it'd hold international gravitas. Probably would have. Doesn't matter. It depends on what you sign. I think, again, that all goes away. But that journey was a fun one. And so that only ended for me after we moved to America, and it became kind of apparent that I couldn't impact it on a day-to-day level. And it wasn't my intention to just stop playing records as much as I did. But I was on the way back from WMC in 2013 in Miami, and stopped back through LA and met a friend of mine. And he said, do you want to look at a rooftop in LA? And I looked at this rooftop and I was like, holy crap, this looks pretty good. And all of a sudden I thought I was going to bounce back and forth between Melbourne and LA, and learning, the nuances of a different country and its label laws and all the other things that goes into opening a venue. Was pretty clear straight away that I'm going to have to spend more time in LA than I thought, but also he was enjoying it. But I was like, how do we still, but then by vicariously it meant I'm not as busy. And I remember I was in, I was Ballarat or somewhere, and I'd done this show just before I went to Miami. And I was like, what's it going to take to continue to maintain the rage? Like you're dancing around the cusp of international, you're doing some shows each year, sure, but haven't got that breakthrough again to that next level, which is that, you're really there, that crossover moment which it's one song, like could could be 30 grand, it could be like, whatever it is. One record can still change everyone. But I was like, if we do that, what does that mean? I was doing 200 flights a year. I'm like, this is a lot. Like for those that haven't done it, it's great. It's the airport disco hotel, Conga Line. You go into all these places and it's great. And you just, every morning it's like, where are we going? Shit, okay. But I remember I was at this place and you're playing songs and you're not playing the songs you want to play, but you're playing for money. So the check was big, but the enjoyment was low. And I was like, I'm a prostitute. I'm a dead set hooker, getting paid to do shit I don't really want very well, but I'm not enjoying this. This is only going to go one way and not good. So I said, I got 10 shows left in Australia for the time being, and I'll reassess. And I did that. I just went and said, I just did the biggest ones, but I was sort of like, but at the same time I was doing, it's not like you walk a plank and go, I got no other backup plan. I was already now vested in LA. I was doing other bits and pieces, but I was like, I don't want to come back and play some shit show for 10 grand and hate every single minute of it. Drive home at 3 a.m. with the window down going, I don't want to die, but I also don't want to stay here. It's just, I want to sleep in my own bed. Like the measurement of success for a DJ, if you're home on a Saturday night, you're a failure. You don't have a gig. That also means you don't go to birthdays, weddings, any of that stuff. That just give it away. Unless you choose to be that unavailable, not career motivated person, you got to sacrifice a lot. And I was sort of like, well, it's cool, but I'm like, what's the end game? You can't sell it. If I'm not working it, I'm not making it. Yes, you got a record label, but what? I want to be 60 playing like Grease Megamix at someone's 60th birthday party? Get fucked. It's not happening. So then, what's your when you have multiple lanes of opportunity in your life, which everyone's got, just pick one thing. You don't have to be aggressive and pull the handbrake and say that's the end of that career. And for me, that's certainly not been the case. I mean, EP, LP, extended play, long play, 7-inch, 12-inch, music's like hospitality. What's the creativity is exactly the same. What's the cuisine? Who am I going to get? Who's the top line guy? Who's the best chef? What's the site? That. Who's the brand guy? That's the brand I want. Like, what's the cocktail list? Is it all music-based? Or it could be. I rang Axwell. I'm like, hey, do you want a part of this action in LA? He was like, yep. So Axe was like, all of a sudden I'm like, got Axwell, cool. That means we're going to have these guys come through. We'll do some stuff. I was with Seb and their whole team and we're sort of figuring it all out. Like it's sort of, so the music for me opened a cafe called Strings of Life. It's a record, it's sort of, my music connection has never gone away. Grandmaster Recorders in LA. It's like it was an old recording studio, Bowie, Blondie, Chili Peppers, Foo Fighters, all of them recorded in this spot. I walked in this time, I'm like, I'm doing this one. Because it's, how do you not? It's had this storied legacy when I've been making a career out of some smoke and mirrors bullshit, making a story and a narrative to suit what it is that it needs. This one had this, I'm just going to have to be the ability to maintain that conversation and relevancy. So it's kind of, music then for me just meant it wasn't my full-time day-to-day job, but it doesn't mean that I don't observe it, understand it, still miss it, of course, all the time. It just means you do it on your own merits whenever you choose to do it. And then the next part of it will be at some point, do you want to go back? And Ivan and I have been saying, do we want to go back and do a track for shits and giggles? But it'd only be for that because I just don't want to tour. I just don't want to sit there and commit to what I'm happy. I love going and watch other people and celebrate their success, but I just don't necessarily need to tick that box anymore. And if I'm getting in the way of someone else's career by taking up that slot, that's irresponsible of me. Now, if we want to do some shows that from people of my era and they choose to come, great. But I certainly never want, and that was one of the major reasons why I stopped also when you could get all these paychecks. But I was like, I am actively in the way of someone else progressing. Let's let them do their thing.
But there's not many people like you talk about you, like you're kind of leaving your career or deciding to like wind it down, I guess, at such a high level. You're talking about $10,000 a gig. You guys are demanding some of the main stage slots and the biggest festivals in Australia. But then you go into EPLP, into this entrepreneurial hospitality journey. Yes, I know there's a connection between the both music and hospitality, but you do that at such a high caliber also. What do you think you learned from being an artist, a musician, a DJ that took you to become such a successful businessman that you've become now, who's sort of famed as one of Australia's best or most successful kind of hospitality gurus?
Well, they're big words, but look, I think, to be honest, mate, look, you gotta you just got to jump in the deep end. If you go into LA, like we opened it's a huge undertaking, but it's go big or go home kind of thing. But if you go and try anything and really apply yourself and you think about what are the lessons you learned to date. So if you're opening up a place like in LA, for example, with EPLP, apart from all of a sudden you've signed this thing and Dave Combies you went to school with and he was doing real estate and he showed me this stuff. But it's at this point we're blind faith. Do we think we can make this work? What are the design things that we like? What do you like in a venue? It sort of becomes, I like this, I like that. Cool. What would you like that's a little bit different or a little bit better? No worries, let's just fix those things. And it becomes, what else do we think is a gap in the marketplace? Then it's just about having the vision, but then getting to execution point. And then if you can consistently execute, it's also then not getting caught in the minutiae of every single part of the business, because you've got to be sitting up on 33,000 feet up rather than just being in the weeds. Now, you've got to be in the weeds with your team all the time, don't get me wrong, but you can't grow your business if you're just chasing your tail all the time. So I think with music, similarly, I'd be like, well, what is the trends? What does it look like? And for me, knowing even if you made a record, there's no guarantee it's a hit, but you've got to keep on that trajectory. But in hospitality, you still look at the same kind of trend models. You're like, what's working? What's the gaps? So you try and fulfill those things, but also play to your strengths. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, you're probably already in the shit. Because if you didn't want to play that record that you made and you weren't going to stand behind it with 100% like determination and say, I stand for this, people believed you. When I walk in front of a crowd, I'll be like, this is me. I'm going to give you 100% of me, and hopefully I'll get some of that back from you. And I think in hospitality, there's no different. You got to sit there and say, this is my ultimate vision. Problem is, when you have records, you don't have to worry about budgets, build costs, all the rest of this stuff. So you might have this idea that's amazing, and you go, I've only got that much money. But that's okay, because that's where the creative part comes in. And I think if you can, when you've managed to find a way in music, which is, again, a dog-eat-dog, hard business to crack, you've probably got the same opportunities to succeed. But the biggest part is the team, recruit the right people. If you get those kind of things right and that culture piece, then generally other things will follow.
EPLP, obviously LA is sort of the epicenter of the universe, especially when it comes to cool. So you guys break LA with EPLP. What was the thought process? What was the sort of, I guess, creative visual that you had in your head, and why did you come up with that name and concept?
We had so many names, and it was the challenge was, we were thinking you got a rooftop and then you had a restaurant. So we had two parts to it. So it could have been called anything. And obviously many venues are just one brand, but all encapsulating. But I was kind of like, if this restaurant, if the rooftop's a party, but the restaurant needs to be serious, so do we need to split them up so there's kind of sub-brands or other things so because it's a bit confronting if you go to a line. Like at one point, EP would have 500 people out the front, and someone's just coming for dinner, and you're like, whoa, this is a zoo. It was a lot. But so EPLP, I was like, and also thinking with Axe and the boys, and I was kind of like, extended play, long play, and I was like, it's too long. But we knew that they meant that, and we sort of said extended play was a rooftop and long play was a restaurant. Sorry, other way around. But I was also then, I'm like, 12-inch, I can see this thing from an artwork perspective. We came for this circle, so we're using effectively what was a record label insert to determine what this artwork could look like. And so we just went through this design exercise, and it sort of just landed. And again, the same thing. I was like, if it works, Americans were like, what's this? Because it was EP and LP. And then after Americans were like, EPLP. I was like, whatever it is, just turn up. I don't really care. But it's sort of, again, now, if you asked anyone what that stands for, 99% of people wouldn't be able to tell you. But maybe part of the fact, because it is a bit of a mouthful and it doesn't really make sense, is also part of the reason why it sticks in their brain, because it's a bit annoying for the Americans. But I got a guy called Louis Tikaram, who was the young chef of the year in Australia. He was cooking at Long Grain. I went and saw him. He was a Byron boy, and he just won this award. And again, you sit there going, well, we've signed this list, we've got to find someone. I went and got who's the hottest shot in Australia at the moment, who's young, who gets it. And he was a massive Clippers fan. I'm like, well, Los Angeles sounds like your place to be, my friend. Come over. What's the worst thing that can happen? You leave Australia, you feather your nest, and you're the champ, you're the executive chef of a brand new concept in Los Angeles, be it hit or otherwise. You can come back to Australia in 2 years' time and say, I opened this thing. This is the same thing. What's the worst thing that can happen? You go and leave Melbourne, you leave Australia, leave where it is, you put yourself in the hurt locker. You thrive because you have to. What are you going to do? Sit around, wait for opportunity to knock? No, you go kick doors down. So for Louis, I was like, come over. One, you like the basketball. Let's go see the Clips. That means I have to support the Lakers because that's going to be important. And then we just recruited a bunch of people. And then if people that we knew that would move their lives and follow us to come to LA in California, it's a huge commitment. And for me, then it was like, we have to deliver. These guys have uprooted their lives to come over and back us in. So it became like a non-negotiable. And I'm not going to say it was an instant hit because it wasn't. We had budget issues. We got to the first Christmas and we were like out of cash. And you have to go back and find a way and shake the tin. It was Merry Christmas. I remember it was Christmas and we had to go and do an extra capital raise to get through this thing. And you go, Merry Christmas, I need more cash. It's like Santa didn't bring it. Because you think we Aussies were like, oh, it just doesn't get cold in winter in California. Had the most unseasonable, cold, wet winter. And you'd sit there, you just didn't plan it in your numbers because you just hadn't lived there your whole life. We got through that first thing, you get through the next summer and we're like, all right, this thing's away. But it's not always roses. Often 99.9% of the time, it's not, because people come out, it gets a sugar hit when you open anything. Even when you finish, there's a great, yeah, but then it's the hard work starts. You open a restaurant, everyone goes, oh, that's so much work. Guess what, sport? You're at base camp. Now we got to go climb the big mountain. And that just comes with repetition time and the ability to make everyone, like if you don't grow, like, and this is probably same with DJing or anything, it's grow or die. Like I provide an opportunity pipeline. And by that I mean if I'm signing someone to my label, why would you not leave my label? Because I got you from here to here and I can then take your career from here to here and I can take your bonuses and sign-ons and I can demonstrate to you that we're a good partner. And if you don't do that, if I don't do that, if someone who's got a bigger check down the road, will you leave? And you should, because I didn't deliver. Now, if I'm doing all the right things and you still take the check, well, that may be a bit of a harder conversation to have. But if you want good people in your team, good people in your group, you've got to, the only rule is make their job easier and just give them like career advancement. If you can do that, they'll stay with you for as long as you want. And at some point, some of these people are going to want to open their own things, and good luck to you. Hopefully you've learned enough along the way to not make mistakes I did. So,
yeah.
That's
and it's so true. Like anyone who's done well in business, like they don't look down at people who move on, who've learned from them. They celebrate them. And like there's so many people I've had across from me sitting in the seat, and they're telling me about people who used to work for them that have now gone on, including yourself with Peter Raff, that have gone on to do stuff, but they almost brag about it. Like that's the best mentality, and probably the constant mentality that I see with good entrepreneurs is that they don't hold people down, they bring people up.
For sure.
When you uprooted your life from Melbourne to LA, like how much of that was a challenge? Like you've left a successful career in Australia to go to LA to what potentially you thought could become even more successful and did, but you didn't know, right? How challenging was that?
It's challenging. Like you sit there, you had, I sold my house and I was like, whoa, all right, there's no real, you got to rip the roots out. Do you know what I mean? No, it's always here. Melbourne's always here for me. But it just also meant then you got to put a lot of that capital back into a project again. It makes you really accountable. But it's also like adventure, man. Like you go somewhere new. Cali's pretty fun, It's the weather's unreal. It's a lot of great people. But it was still like I knew in the back of my mind, I'm like, what's the backup here? And there's sort of knowing that I'll come back and do 10 shows a year and what do they look like? But still you got to be somewhat relevant in that space. And I was still doing Nova from there for a period of time. But again, all these things, it's sort of, unless you're present, it becomes kind of fake. Even when we're doing pre-records and I'm like, I'm not really in the studio. It's kind of, and even Nova could tell, it sounded different. And your relevancy wasn't as present, I guess, or that, because you're just not here. Like you just got to be around. But in saying all that, going over there, your network when you open a venue was like I mentioned earlier, but I remember the first night I was on the door and you just, hi, welcome. They plugs you in, particularly when we started doing, events for Netflix and whatever else and cool stuff. I mean, you're getting celebs and whatever else, not that if it moves your needle, but you get it, they're normal people that do normal things like everyone else. But Matt Damon's birthday party or this, that. I'm like, this is pretty fun. But then you meet the agents that are doing these things, and all of a sudden you're meeting this whole, network of different people over there. And it's a bit like you might say in Melbourne, it's a cooler city, but if you want to get a check sign, you probably go to Sydney because that's where the big international businesses are. LA and Hollywood in particular was where all the networks and all the production studios were. So you're getting these amazing events, but then plugging into the right people in that town, which made your job a lot easier. And so the connections that I made pretty quickly over there were really deep and powerful, and so I've still got, a lot of friends. I'm going to LA for our 10th birthday next week, and we're going to take Louis, our original chef, back. We're going to do a bunch of like celebratory kind of lunches with the original team, which is great. And we had some great supporters in America and made a lot of great friends in America, and still do. So I still go back and forth, but at the moment, sort of, it's good to come back and to coin an American term, put the old comfy sweater on back in Melbourne. But it's a great place to have cut my teeth, and I'll always do it. But I think that nomadic or ability, once you've left the warm hug of Melbourne, you shouldn't fear of any. If you can go punch on with the biggest in the world in LA or New York or London or wherever it is, it's just we Aussies can hold our own, and I think that I'll never fear that opportunity of change, because change is ultimately good. You'll benefit from it even if you fail, because it's good to put yourself in a place you don't want to be.
It's when you see the best come out of yourself.
For sure.
So you have businesses in Melbourne. You've got bars and restaurants in Melbourne. You said the one that you've just opened up at Crown.
Yep.
And you've also got Ponyfish.
Yep.
Is that challenging running businesses in America in Melbourne?
Yeah, yes and no. Ponyfish is actually a really interesting one. We've got 7 staff there that are on long service, like entitlements, whatever else. We've got a great team. So really, really great business and great people. This is the people piece. If you've got the right team, it's good. If you've got a crappy team, it's really hard. But you've just got to put in the time. You've got to make sure you get, you commit to meetings and you commit to like FaceTimes with these people. As I say, not FaceTime, but if I was in America, yes, FaceTime. But if I'm in Melbourne, seeing them, going to the venues and being tactile in them. But yeah, it's hard. You've got to have great people and a great team. But there's nothing like being there. Seeing the whites of someone's eyes is a pretty good way to understand the business. But if you're always going to be hamstrung. If that's the thing that you need to resolve to allow you to continue to grow or be nimble or otherwise, that's the one thing you need to fix in your business. So if that becomes the challenge, resolve what that looks like. Everything else is gravy.
What's next for you in music and in hospitality? Can you share some stuff that you're doing? Are you looking to move back into music? I know you mentioned you're doing something with TV Rock again, maybe. Can you give us any news on any of those 4 fronts?
Sure. The answer is there's no set plan. I think opportunity comes in really interesting ways. So this year I'm going to commit to looking. We're sort of normalizing the Crown project that I'm on. And I still think it's really super important in your first year or two to really be present a lot to understand the nuances of your business. But in saying that, travel to go and look at opportunities, Dubai, Europe, America, and then music-wise, if it's fun, let's see how we go. Awesome.
I reckon there'll be a lot of people watching this going, fuck, I hope that Grant comes back and does some massive gigs in Melbourne, or TV Rock do a bit of a reunion. Yeah, look, I think that for me, as I've always said, like it's got to be the right things in the right times. For us, Ivan and I, like we're still great mates. We catch up often when we're back, and it's good to shoot the shit, about times. But when the time's right, it's sort of for us, it'll be the right thing. But the one thing I'll tell you, it'll be a banger, because we're not going to bother to put out shit. Too old for that. It's got to be a cracker. And then for Melbourne, if it's a show, then the show's got to be for the same reasons. Whatever the money I get for it, it goes back into the show, and probably I'll be paying more out of my pocket to make sure it's memorable, because there's only a certain amount of times you got on the planet. So let's make it great. Yeah, great. So Grant, thank you so much for coming down today and giving me an hour. I know you're a super busy guy. You're a worldwide businessman now, but I really appreciate it. I wanted to say thank you so much for inspiring the generations like myself. Like, my earliest memories are being in dance floors that you were curating and watching yourself blow up through business, be it DJing, TV Rock, working hospitality, and you were definitely someone that I looked up to. Even me interviewing you today, I've actually been nervous for the first time, because you were someone that I always sort of put on a pedestal. So I appreciate you sitting down with me, and I guess without people like you kind of charging forward in different scenes and industries and kicking down the door, people like myself can't follow those paths. So I appreciate your time and thank you so much for doing what you've done for Melbourne and I guess the next generation that will continue to do amazing things like you have.
Appreciate it. It's a very, very kind words, but also don't underestimate what you're doing right now, because the reason why I'm here is because I've seen what you're doing, and this will open up new paths and opportunities, and all you need to do is see where this may take you, my friend. You're doing a great job.
I'm enjoying the ride, so thank you so much for coming along with me.
Pleasure.